when you're thinking about that hourglass and you're thinking about how much time you have and what, just don't allow anyone to strip you of your hope. Children with autism have talked at 2 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, and learned how to find their voice and communicate even beyond that. So there is no hourglass. It is, they will reach their voice. They will find their way with you as their mom and dad to guide them. They'll get there and they'll be okay. And so will you.
Welcome back to A Mother's Guide Through Autism podcast. Today's guest, Christine Goulbourne, is a special needs mom, advocate, and writer. Christine lives with her family in Florida. As a mother of a young man with autism, Christine knows it's crucial for special needs parents to be well informed of special educational services, employment, and future preparation. After receiving training from various leading advocacy experts and serving on many councils and boards, Christine helps special needs parents to advocate for their child's right to be educated, employed, and included. Christine believes a child's success begins with meaningful parent involvement. Welcome, Christine, to A Mother's Guide Through Autism. I'm really looking forward to this interview because we are going to have a great conversation about grief.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So we were talking just a little bit before I hit record, and we have a lot of similar ideas about grief. And we were just talking about how the word grief can be kind of scary and big. And that's why we're going to have this conversation, because in fact, it's part of the journey, and it's can feel scary and icky and nobody wants to talk about it, but here we are.
Mm-hmm. It's an important topic.
It is an important topic. Mm-hmm. And so I would like to start with your own personal autism journey and tell us about your son and his autism diagnosis.
Absolutely. Well, my son's name is Richie. He's 21 years old now. And interestingly enough, he is living on his own with assisted living and supports nearby. And that's something I'm still dealing with, in fact, because that's not easy. But he's thriving and he's doing well. He's doing really well. He was diagnosed at 2 years old. My journey actually started even before that, though, because I had noticed signs of autism as early as 7 months old. Having my daughter was a great reference, so I knew of all the milestones and the things to look for. And when he didn't follow my gaze, or he started exhibiting different mannerisms, even that young, spastic hands, things like that. I knew I just had the instinct that most of us moms get even prior to the diagnosis for some of us, or most of us, right? But this was unusually early. And of course, I was met with, it's fine. Yeah. You gotta wait this out, because this was in 2002. This was in the early 2000s where no one really wanted to give that diagnosis still.
Yeah, I get it.
His pediatrician told us, let's wait. Fast forward to 2 years later, where it was undeniably obvious that there was significant delays. Then we got Richie's diagnosis. And even though in the cycle, I talk about denial, that was actually one that I didn't really experience because I already had the inclination that he had autism. I looked it up. I mean, at that time, the only reference I had was the movie Rain Man. I'd watched it when I was 16. I'm totally dating myself, but but that was the only reference I had until I remembered a magazine article, and Richie hit almost every single indicator, except for three. He wasn't opposed to touching or hugging or anything like that, but everything else on target. And so he got the diagnosis, and like most people, even though I was expecting the diagnosis, because I had already had my suspicions, I was still clinging to hope. I'm wrong. I got to be wrong on this. So and that's what that was my immediate, that was the experience at first. And then it was just get busy mode, posting sticky notes all over the place. Get busy, Christine, because it was all about getting this resolved. And at that point, you keep hearing about, ABA therapy, 40 hours that you have to get in there. And you're like, how am I going to do all this, with a full-time job, or whatever our individual situations are at the time. We are racing against an hourglass, or that's how it felt at first. And it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And so I had to learn right away how to pace myself. But going through everything, from my first IEP meeting to becoming an avid advocate, into the community, it became clear to me that I had to completely immerse myself into the system, learn and absorb as much as I could. Thinking back on it now, I would have paced myself better. The resources, the information is going to be there, it's not going to go away. But like many of us, I just wanted to get it done. I wanted to solve this. This was not going to be, I was going to exhaust everything I could to help him. And so I learned about the special needs special education process. I learned about the resources in the area. I became a program coordinator for one of the parent training information centers. Every state has one, a PTI. And that's how I got to become well-versed with special education processes, becoming an inclusion advocate, for families, for my son, and then just continually learning IDEA, Section 504, Rehab Act, everything. And knowing that was so overwhelming, then my experience shifted to, I needed to be able to help other families to get through this, because this was so hard. And, how do I, then that's when I really delve into advocacy for both my son, but then also for families as well. And we're active family in the community. There isn't a single person in our family who doesn't feel that Richie changed our lives for the better, teaching us the main message. And as, a woman of faith, this is the most noble purpose, is to teach us that we have to care about each other and help each other, so.
Yeah, I really feel that. I already got goosebumps several times. I can really feel that, and I can relate to it. Joseph was diagnosed in 96. And again, I referenced Rain Man as well, because I didn't know anything else.
Mm-mm.
And neither did anybody else. And so it was like, I was we're aligned, very similar, just hoping that I was wrong, and hoping that, this would go away, and that, it was just, we had his hearing check. I went through every checklist that there was in hopes that it was just something other than a lifelong diagnosis. And I think that's what's so scary about it. And I coach moms, and this is still true today, so many years later, that you get the diagnosis and they send you home, and get with somebody and get some therapy for and we'll see in 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is, depending on
thin packet of information, which you have no idea what any of these agencies are going to do and how they're going to help your son or child.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Oh yeah.
And I know for myself, when I heard that autism although I knew something was off, when it hit me hard. Like I barely remember driving home, and I thought, what are we going to do? And it was so doom and gloom. He's not going to be able to ever live independently. He's not. And I heard all the things that he wasn't going to be able to do before we even understood what autism was.
Right.
So it's really tough when you first get that diagnosis, and everybody journeys a little different, but I think the commonality that we have as moms is our hearts are broken,
Mhm.
and it's very, very painful. And you wrote a great article,
Thank you.
and you called it Understanding the Grief Cycle of an Autism Parent. And I would love if you would just to talk about what the 5 stages of grief, the grief cycle is, just your knowledge, how you experience it, and what you want to personally share about that.
Well, absolutely. Where there's denial, anger, depression, guilt, and acceptance. And the difference between the process and a cycle, is that with the process, that there's an end, right? When you're dealing, an example would be while both are experiencing loss, the difference would be experiencing, when you experience a loss of someone you love, when there's a death in the family, that's finite, that's final. It's not, you'll always experience the pain of the loss, and I'm not downplaying that at all. But with autism, it is a cycle because it's ongoing. You're going to experience these things, and maybe some of them you won't, but you will experience each of these things at different times and throughout your journey in this life, as a parent of a child with autism, because it evolves, right? There's always changing and new challenges. For me, like I mentioned before, the denial piece wasn't necessarily there for me because I had already suspected he had autism, and a lot of parents do. And in most cases, it's usually the dads that have the hard time with accepting a diagnosis of autism, especially with a son or daughter. Because it's a whole different experience for them. But I think everyone goes through a small phase of denial, where they don't want to even, they may even delay getting a diagnosis, even when they're told or suggested by schools, because we live in a world filled with labels and stigmas and misconceptions, and a lot of misinformation. So that denial piece is crucial. I think most parents will find their way, to get around that once they, so important to speak to other veteran parents and realize that it's not all gloom and doom, and that there is, that the path is going to have wondrous moments, and that there's just different experiences that you will relish, and enjoy and love and remember, and it's unparalleled to other things, so there are things that you will experience that are amazing, but it doesn't feel that way at first. And it didn't for me. Like you, when I first got the diagnosis, I was devastated. I was depressed for a long time. I think one of the first things I experienced was anger. I was mad, and I couldn't speak objectively to anyone about it for a while. And luckily, I wasn't terribly rude, or obnoxious, but I did make some, unsavory retorts, so if somebody said to me, well, I always noticed there was something off, I'd say like, oh, well, of course you didn't say anything. Why didn't you say something then, or, oh, well, I don't even think it's autism. Are you sure? Oh, yeah, we only went through 15 hours of observation, and we only went through like 17 visits of, so of course that doesn't matter, so you feel these emotions and they're natural, completely
Mhm.
natural to feel, to take offense to certain things. And you can only hope that the people who are trying to comfort you in some way, because they don't know how either, right, when they're approaching you, that they understand at that moment, that you're going through something extraordinary. And usually people don't know how to react to something extraordinary. But for me, the anger part still surfaces to this day. It does. It comes up, especially, I would say, mostly during the times of when I'm feeling absolutely defeated, whether it's through a service system, or what we're experiencing, or challenging behavior, which he still exhibits, or if he has a seizure, things like that, that will bring up the anger and those why me moments,
Yeah.
tend to surface every once in a while. But I'm lucky that, and I suggest this to all families as well, is developing a set of tools or strategies for how to combat those emotions when they surface,
Mhm.
because you already know they're going to come, and you
Yeah.
know that you're going to expect them. So you start to learn self-preservation. You start to learn different mechanisms for dealing with, especially anger and depression and things like that. Um, Depression rears its head more often than not. Sometimes we don't feel it. Sometimes we don't even know we're depressed. Um, for me, seeking, talking, writing is one of my most therapeutic ways of dealing with things. So journaling what I'm experiencing and what I'm feeling is helpful, because you can always refer to it too later. But even dealing with depression, uh, that's one that we have to really tune into our bodies and know what the tail signs are. Are you sleeping more? Are you becoming quiet, distant? You may feel moments of isolation, because that's something that does happen to us in the autism community. Parents feel that way. Their kids are not invited to birthday parties or things like that. So that can spark depression. I had a brilliant mom say something to me that always stuck with me. She said, "You're only as happy as your happiest child."
Yes.
And it's true. And one of the things that creeps up on us, at least me, I will speak personally. Um, I allowed for a time after the diagnosis for my son's mood to dictate mine. So if he was upset, I was upset, because I needed to figure out now how to solve that. If
Yeah.
he was depressed or angry or exhibiting challenge, now I had to put on my detective hat and figure out how I was going to deal with this and fix this. Then I was sad. So being able to deal with that was learning how I was going to deal with that, whether it meant breathing exercises, whether it meant yoga, whether it meant just taking a few deep breaths before I react, because then you become snippy towards others when you're angry, because you're reacting to your experience, which is normal, right? That's expected. But as we start to navigate these waters, where we're dealing with this process, this cycle, then we have to learn to recognize the signs and the symptoms, and then put our strategies in place for dealing with them, you know. Um, uh, and then finally, there's guilt. This one, the guilt is not final, but it's one of the next ones. I would have to say guilt is one of my worst ones. That hits me a lot. In my family, autism is prevalent, especially in Richie's generation. So I
Yeah.
have, yeah, I have many of my cousins who are now, their kids are being diagnosed. Not as severe as Richie, which then sometimes when I am dealing with something challenging, I get to that why me mode. How come?
Yeah.
I got the hardest hand of cards here. But what I learned was I had to forgive myself for certain things I couldn't do, because there was the 40 hours of ABA therapy that you keep hearing about that you have to pay for, which was unbelievably impossible. It was just not going to happen. There was, the therapy treatments, everything that we had to try to get done that seemed hard to reach and inaccessible. There was, what if he did get this because my family is so prevalent? What if this was my fault? We have to realize and recognize that no, it's not. I had to go from, this is something that is happening to me, to thinking this is something that just happened.
Yeah.
I think that once we get that wrapped around that, I think we can move past that and learn to deal with that. Because guilt is a tough one, really, really tough one. And I think that one surfaces often for me. The other is finally acceptance. Being able to figure out how to embrace the situation with positivity, and how we're going to move forward dealing with this cycle that we're going to deal with while we're working towards improving the quality of our child's lives, right? But it's not just about improving the quality of our child's lives, it's also about improving the quality of our overall family's life, because more than often there's more than just one or two people involved, and everyone is impacted. And we want to make sure that we can still try to maintain that healthy balance that seems so hard to reach, but it's not. It's just changing our mindset from, yes, we moved from dealing with the conventional path that we all wanted while we were pregnant. You mentioned it earlier. We had all these dreams and everything. And the answer is think differently, celebrate differently. And that's where the mind shift takes place. And it really is helpful to start recognizing how we're going to deal with these cycles when we're going to go through it, because we will.
Yeah.
And then what set of coping mechanisms can we come up with? Because we're all different. Some people like to run. I wish I could. It would change so much, but I can't stand running. I love to write, but that's not everybody's, forte. Maybe it's just listening to music or taking a hot shower. It doesn't have to be anything that's expensive. It's just being able to recognize what you're feeling at the moment when you do, and how you're going to deal with it.
Yeah, and that can be really tough. Like I spoke to a mom earlier today, and she had just, like, she's at the beginning of this journey, right? And her just saying there's no time. I don't have time for anything. I've let my hair go. I mean, she's just like in that, I can remember that feeling.
Oh, yeah.
And that would make me
yeah.
mad. Don't tell me to try to take care of myself. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Because I don't have time for that. I've got to problem solve. It was go, 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 go. And, but well, exactly what you're saying, if we can just take a breath, first thing I say is no matter what, we're going to be okay. We are, I don't know what it looks like yet, but what I do know for sure is somehow, some way we're going to be okay. And just breathe that in and just believe it, because it's true. And I have had the cycles of grief you were talking about. I've had all 5 in one day.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like everything is just appears to be a new normal. And then something comes out of nowhere and you're just like, well, the denial is like, oh, I don't believe, like say it happened at school. I don't believe my son Joseph would do that.
Right.
And then
Turns out at home.
yeah. And then you finally get to the end of it and you're like, oh, okay. We've got to work on this or whatever, but I've experienced all 5 in a day. And you talk about like what you were talking about, the grief cycle is ongoing. And you explain that so well, and that if you can recognize and understand what's happening, have that awareness, I think you can muddle through it. I do,
Mhm.
I think it's muddling, it's stumbling, but at least you have an idea of what's happening to yourself.
Exactly. And once you recognize that this is what you're going through, then it's a little easier to start to developing those coping mechanisms so that you're prepared. Okay, I'm going through this depression right now. I need to do this, this, and this, whatever it is. Because everybody has their own way of dealing with something.
Mhm.
Whether, and I know that you're right, because I did that too. I don't have time for this. What are you talking about? And sometimes even self-care is perceived as selfish. Well, guess
Yeah.
what? Well, guess what? It's okay to be selfish. In fact, you have to be, because you need to make that time for yourself. And I know people don't like to hear this, but you're no good to anybody if you get sick, if the depression, spirals into something more clinical, if you want to be able to get a handle on these things, because you can. We are resilient. We're built to be resilient, to bounce back, to deal with things, to survive. There's been so many instances, and I know that so many moms and dads in the autism community can say this, where you thought and you had that moment, how am I going to get through this? Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
We've had those moments where we're on the floor and maybe we're praying or we're doing something, or we're asking for help because we have no idea how we're going to get through this specific situation.
Mhm.
You
There
know,
are on your knee moments.
yes, on your knee moments, and there has been more than one in mine. And I'm anticipating that there may be another, but I know how I'm going to be able to deal with that when that time comes, with whatever I have in place for myself, because I know my body, I know my mind, I know my limits, I know where I'm getting to that point where, okay, what I've done is I've triggered anxiety, or I've
Yeah.
triggered this, or and then it's that self-awareness that helps us to develop the self-care process. Some of us are a little late bloomers, because I was stubborn for a long time. Are you kidding? I had to save my son by Tuesday. I,
Oh, me too.
you
Me
know,
too.
I needed to do this, and I needed, what was next? I fell asleep at the computer. I fell asleep on books, had books on my face when I woke up in the morning. I was joining every support group you could think of, having my emails flooded with information. I've done all those things that is classic for all of us to do, but it's so important to pace ourselves, listen to other veteran parents, find out what they did and what they're doing. The resources are going to be there. They're going to be there. They're not going anywhere.
Learn from us, because
Mhm.
I mean, I've been shaking my head yes almost through everything you say, because absolutely it's so overwhelming and I want to fix it now.
Right.
I don't want to hear that this is a journey. This is not
Mhm.
going to be my journey, because I'm going to fix it.
Yeah,
And it's exhausting.
it is. It is. It takes a lot out of us.
Yeah. And I've talked about this before, but I look at pictures of my son. He was so cute, the cutest little boy you've ever seen. And I feel like I missed some of that. And I look at him now and I'm like, oh, I didn't stop and really see him. I loved him more than life itself, but at the same time, I was in that fix it mode, and I've got to
Mhm.
help him, got to help him, and then I miss the fun stuff, because there is
Yeah,
stuff.
you're absolutely right. And that's part of the acceptance process too, because when I had to learn how to do things differently, and a lot of times Richie had to force me into it. For the
Right.
longest time, we were celebrating birthdays the conventional way,
Yeah.
having everybody over, all friends. None were his friends. They were our friends who loved him and became his friends. And do the big parties that typical kids at 7, 8, 9 years old would do. And what I started to see was my son was inside the house crying. Everyone else was outside enjoying the bounce house. And I said, okay, this doesn't feel right. This is wrong. I realized I was doing these birthday parties for me.
Mm,
They weren't for him.
yeah.
And then I learned how to ask him, and have him point to yes and no questions, which we got good at for communication because he's non-speaking. And it was wonderful to be able to learn from him. Are you having a good time at your party? No. Would you like all these people to leave? Yes. And I stumbled upon a site called wrongplanet.net. And it is a website created by people with autism. And they have different forums on there that I was able to stumble upon. And boy, was that enlightening to read, because I typed in birthdays and all the stuff that came up about, I hate when my parents make me celebrate. I have no choice. I'm expected to socialize in these difficult and complex situations. And if I don't say thank you, now I'm, getting reprimanded. I don't want the loudness of this yelling happy birthday. I don't want to open presents in front of a bunch of people and then have to react. I don't know how to react. And half the stuff they give me, I don't want. And, here I am, we're being forced to celebrate in a fashion that I have no desire to do it this way. And no one has ever asked me what I wanted to do for my birthday.
Oh, that's
That broke my heart. And that was part of my accepting doing things differently. And whatever it was, okay, so no, we weren't going to invite aunts and uncles anymore, and cousins and big families from what we were used to, because that was tradition, but that was our tradition. We had to develop a different one for him. And that meant asking him what he wanted to do and using pictures. And guess what? He wanted to go to a theme park. He wanted to go to Universal Studios. That was his favorite theme park. And that's what we did. We ended up going on his birthday after that to Universal Studios, and he had a blast and he loved it.
I have to know, does he still want to do that at 20?
Actually, he's changing. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't, so yes, if we did give him a choice, but he chooses different ones, so he'll choose whatever he's interested in, but he likes the more intimate celebration with just his immediate family. He
Yeah.
won't mind other family members coming as long as he gets that theme park. So we might have a few extra cousins, and he's fine with that.
Yeah.
Wants to hang out with them. He just didn't want that loud party at the house, his sanctuary.
Yeah, where he gets to be and be safe.
Mhm.
And I have to go out here and go out there, and that's why some of the adult autistic folks that I've interviewed, they talk about masking, because it's just easier to pretend than it is to try to change it or
Right.
explain it. And I don't know
To get into a whole issue. Yeah, exactly. And that's what my son was doing. And
Yeah.
that broke my heart. It's his birthday. He should celebrate it the way he wants to.
Absolutely.
But see, that is part of the acceptance cycle, because we're still holding on to the conventional path that we expect it to be on. And that's what people do. We get big togethers and families, and it's not what he wanted. So that was a harsh lesson for me, but a wonderful one, because then I realized, okay. And that's when I started to do more research, speaking to autistic people, visiting sites like that to educate myself, and not that one autistic person represents everyone, but getting an idea, for what's out there and how they're feeling, and hearing that they were so sad or they cried themselves to sleep at the end of it. I thought, oh no, okay, we're going to look at this a little differently and give Richie choices. And that seemed to have worked out. That worked out wonderful. But that took an awareness, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that, parents listening, anyone who's like teachers, anybody, we're recording this in the month of April. Autism Awareness Month. And I think that's really great to talk about, to give others insight, and also to create the awareness, go, oh, well, let me see what my child actually wants or doesn't want in birthday parties or whatever. Um, you've come against some resistance from people who are close to you when you were experiencing the moments of grief.
Yes.
Why do you think that was the case?
I think oftentimes people, when they're faced with something that's unusual or extraordinary for them,
Yeah.
like I mentioned before, they don't always know how to deal with it,
Mhm.
or say the right thing. I've had people who said to me, "Oh, well, thank God at least you have a normal child, right? You have Samantha. Thank God for that." And it stifles you when you hear some of these things sometimes. In this particular instance, it was a woman. It's happened to me twice, actually. Once with someone very close to me whom I love very much. And she had said Richie was only 4 years old. And she said, "Well, so when do you consider institutionalization?" And I remember I said, I actually have to go to the store, and because these relatives were staying with me, and I had to go outside and sob in my car for 2 hours, because I wasn't going to make a scene, and I wasn't in the right frame of mind to answer appropriately. So I left so that I can deal with my emotion at that moment, and then went back in, and we didn't talk about it, but I sent them an email explaining, don't ever say that to anyone,
Yeah.
any parent. Okay. The other time was, Richie was well along on 8 years old, maybe. And we were at a camping trip when a relative said to me, and I was crying because he was having a really bad episode. And it's too much stimuli, a lot of stuff going on. We had to move him out from the tent he was in, and we had to actually sleep in a different tent outside, away from everyone else, because he was being very disruptive. And the next day I was very teary-eyed and emotional over it, because once again, it's a reminder of how different, this is, and how different he is from his peers, and how challenging it can be. And she, rolled the eyes. Okay, yes, we know he has autism. Shouldn't you be over it by now? Because he's 8 years old. Well, no. And that it was actually that experience that prompted me to write the article, so that to help family members and friends who don't know what to say or what not to say, or how to encourage and support. Had she said something like, "Don't know what you're going through every day, but you do an amazing job, doing it the best you can."
Yeah.
Saying something like that is more encouraging and supportive than, "Oh my gosh, shouldn't you just get over this already? I mean, how many years has it been since the diagnosis? How much are you going to mourn this?" Well, I'm going to mourn it every time something changes, because as he's getting older, he's evolving and changing. When he was 8 years old, I didn't know if he would ever learn to ride a bike. He did, 2 years later. I didn't know if he would ever stop using diapers. He stopped at 9 years old, and that was a great celebration for me, but there's so many changes that you're going through while you're on this foreign path. And it's going to be foreign often, because there's going to be new things that you go through. My son, turned 10 and 11 years old, and we're going to all our other kids' sports events and things like that. And I think to myself, I would have loved to have been celebrating or cheering Richie on, but okay, maybe one day, or maybe some other way.
Right.
That's how I look at that, right? Um, but it's ongoing, because there's old behaviors that surface, right? Whether it's a self-injurious destruction of property, or aggression towards others, whatever it might be, or repetitive behaviors, or inappropriate discussions, or things like that that we're going to deal with as they come. And then there's maybe new behaviors that we weren't expecting that are going to surface, different mannerisms, different things. So there's always going to be something. It doesn't mean that it's going to be awful and terrible each time, but just different. And
Yes.
different is going to, because I have to tell you, sometimes I've forgotten Richie has had autism. There's been moments I forget.
I can relate to that.
You're dealing with the day-to-day stuff and you're used to, and you're in your routine, and for a long time it stays that way, and it's great. And then there were days that I forgot about autism, and then we're in a setting where he's with, among people who are his peers, and then okay, I'm reminded again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
remember.
call that the old punch in the gut, where you just like, oh yeah.
There it is.
Now I remember.
Uh-huh.
And those are those moments where what you were talking about earlier, where you do have the self-awareness and you do understand what's going on, and kind of catch your breath, and then you do know how to move forward from those painful moments, but they are ongoing. And I know that you had added another stage to grief in your one of your articles, and which is joy and
Yes.
happiness, which I love that, because I do think that we need to celebrate. I say, and yeah, I know that's hard to do when it's at the very beginning, but I think adding joy and happiness to these stages I think that's magical. So do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. That's the best part,
It
because,
is.
every day he surprises us with something new and amazing. Whether
Mhm.
it's, his extending his vocabulary, letting us know how incredibly intelligent and smart he is. We're doing spelling to communicate. And to find out that my son knows history, archaeology, biology, more so than me. He could knock anyone out, and just answering questions yes and no, and then spelling his answers. Impressive. Shows me, wow, he's an amazing guy, and
Yeah.
there's so much he can do, and that's a celebration. Hearing him, make jokes, because he's actually comical, quite comical. He wants to engage us, so he'll make these silly sounds, and you have to repeat them in exactly the same way he does, almost like Simon Says. And when you goof it, which of course we will, because he makes it impossible, he knows it. He'll make this weird strand of sounds and expect you to repeat it verbatim. We never do, and he cracks up laughing. I think it's just a ploy to make us look ridiculous, which is funny. But that's his way of interacting with us and joking around. He could be in a completely different room, and he listens to everything. I don't get it twisted when it comes to Richie, because he knows everything that's going on around him. He may have his headphones on, but he might not even listening to anything at all, because he's in tune with what's going on in the surrounding. Or he'll have one earphone off because he's listening to everything. And he'll hear us talking or whatever, and my husband and I going back and forth, and he'll yell out from his room, "I know." Or he might say, or he might even say, and of course we can't help but laugh, "Shut up." And we crack up laughing. And he does use some cuss words. We're not proud of that. So luckily for us, he can't, there's certain consonants he still can't pronounce yet. So when he says puck, we just tell people he's a hockey enthusiast.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know those words are that takes practice to I
But celebrating looks different for us
guess.
all, right? And it doesn't matter how small the milestone or whatever it is. It's something that's reached. So when he reaches an IEP goal, when he learned how to ride a two-wheel bike, which I didn't think he would ever learn, I was impressed. Seeing him every day do different things and learning how to master different tasks, it's amazing to me. He's living outside the home in a group home, doing well with 10 guys. They go out all the time. They're in the community all the time. And I always want to bring him home. Okay. That's me.
That's mom.
And I'm learning that he doesn't want to come home. I'll ask him, so do you want to come spend the weekend with me? Nope.
Yeah.
Okay. And don't get me wrong, it's a good feeling. It's bittersweet, because of course I miss him terribly and I want to see him, but he's 21 and that's typical, right? He wants to hang out with the guys. He wants to be on his own. He wants to explore different things that he hadn't been, or maybe might not have been able to living with me,
Right.
so it is a different journey. Here we go. I'm on a different path. My son's not living with me. Very hard. Very hard. My husband and I are on two different fields when it comes to entering the empty nest stage.
Yeah.
Oh
I
yeah.
feel you.
He's excited. Can't wait. I am just looking for every excuse to bring them all back home for dinner on Sundays.
You and I, yes, yes, yes. I'm the same exact way. I miss them, but then I think, well, isn't that what this journey is
Yes,
where we wanted to go with our kids, right?
absolutely.
See them happy and thriving and joy and celebration. So I personally want to say thank you for talking about that. I don't think we celebrate enough. I think that no matter where you are on this journey, the joy and happiness is in every single day.
Yes. Yes, it
You
is.
just need to find it.
It is. It is. And it's, celebrate the smallest of the small measures. Absolutely. Saying hello when it was appropriate. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Or when he does something spontaneous,
Yeah.
or when he demonstrates that affection,
Mhm.
that we know he has to prepare himself for,
Mhm.
you know, um, these are the things that are difficult for them. And when they're able to do it, and at will, and because they're trying so hard, I've seen my son put his hands under his legs and sit and try to sit on them to prevent from hitting himself in the head. That's an effort. And while it sounds sad, it's a wonderful thing because he's demonstrating self-control,
Yeah.
and using his own strategies that he's developed himself to deal with something that's challenging for him.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Oh my gosh. So I started to learn to smile at different things as we go through the day and appreciate that. Appreciate those little small, doings that mean so much. And just maintaining positivity, positive, using positive reinforcement is a tool that has helped our overall family deal with even ourselves and each other. How do we respond to each other? It's not all about just learning how to respond to Richie. It's taught us how to improve our relationships interchangeably, in our family. How do we use the positive reinforcement or positive behavior support process in a way that embodies everybody, you
Yes.
know, in the entire family, and that's important to recognize that and to do that, I think.
Yeah, it does. It trickles. And I think the positive thing is it's so important for all of us to hear. I know we don't do it enough. So if you're listening out there, try to add that stage to your daily life. And I know that you've already talked about the advocacy work that you do, but is there anything that you want to add to that? Tell us about what's going on with your work
Absolutely.
that you do.
It's very exciting times. Right now, of course, I do have the website Sensory Friends that offers a myriad of resources, information, blog posts like the grief cycle one, but others also on pretty much every topic, from Americans Disability Act I like to keep up on the legislative times. So I share a great deal of information on the site, as well as other resources that would be helpful to other families. Also building, I'm in the process of building a directory for special needs families so that they can identify businesses and services that are disability friendly, and sensory friendly. So that's something that I'm still working on. And I'm writing books, children's books as well, which I should be published relatively soon.
Congratulations. There's
Thank
such
you.
a need for that.
Thank you.
Yes, that's wonderful work. And I think it's I have so many conversations with moms, and I think moms are like such great superheroes, because no matter how, like, if you don't know how to contribute, you'll find something that you can contribute to help, like to support each other, to help each other. We all have gifts. We all have ways that we can make a difference. And your work that you're doing is just really beautiful. So thank you on
Yeah.
behalf of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's wonderful. And you as well. The work you're doing is amazing.
Thank you. I am before we go, I really would like for you to tell us what your best advice, your biggest lessons have been for you, that you can pass along and pay it forward to anyone who's listening.
Absolutely. To families, I would say parents who, whether you're newly diagnosed or you're still dealing with some really, really serious, challenging situations that may have made you feel like you're boxed in a corner or you're completely isolated, because we've all felt that way one time or another. Again, I would say pace yourself. The resources, the information, the research, everything is going to be there the next day and the next day after that. Remember that you have an overall family that you're thinking about and not just yourself. And I know that that is so hard, but even just blocking off 1 hour evening for just yourself, start with that one little step. And another thing that's important too is, there's a fine line between hope and denial.
Mm.
And what I would say is, whatever you believe, your child is going to get better. Your child is going to learn. Your child is going to succeed. Yes to all those things. Believe them, work towards that. And also remember, don't allow anyone to strip you of your faith and your hope. No matter what you're going through, no matter what challenge you're dealing with, because you're going to have people who are going to say, oh, he's in denial, that's never going to happen or whatnot. You stick to your whatever it is you're working on and working towards. Something doesn't work, you move on to something else. This doesn't work, because again, all the resources and information are going to be out there. But just remember to pace yourselves. And if you're newly diagnosed, you may not feel okay right now, but you will be. You will be. Look towards families with experience like Bridget, like us out there who have been through it. Ask for help, seek help. There is no reason for you to do it alone or to do all the research alone. So many resources exist out there. If the best resource I could give families is the Parent Training Information Center, there is one in every single state. They're called PTIs. They do the homework for you. They can do the research. They can find out what resources are available to you, if there's respite available and how you can access it, because that's an important thing, is to get respite, to get that break, for nurturing the relationships that also exist in your life, and remembering that. And I know that that's hard because you don't want to think about those things. When you're thinking about that hourglass and you're thinking about how much time you have and what, just don't allow anyone to strip you of your hope. Children with autism have talked at 2 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, and learned how to find their voice and communicate even beyond that. So there is no hourglass. It is, they will reach their voice. They will find their way. with you as their mom and dad to guide them, they'll get there and they'll be okay. And so will you.
Hmm. Well, if that doesn't offer hope and inspiration, I don't know what does. That's beautiful. And I do think that we need to be reminded of that. So thank you so much. That was beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So people are going to want to know where to find you. Where can we find you?
So my website is www.sensoryfriends.com. I am on Facebook using the same handle, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Christine Goulbourne is my name there. And please reach out to me. Anyone who wants information on how to navigate something. I also have a online support group on Facebook that we post a lot of information. It's private, but you can look for it and ask to join. There's whatever answers we don't know, we'll look it up and find it for you. There's ways to nowadays to access help where you don't have to take on the burden of doing all the research yourself. There's a lot of agency help out there. A lot of us are who have been through it, can offer different suggestions, strategies, and things to help deal with certain situations and challenging behavior or challenging issues that you may be experiencing. So there's a lot of us out there who have those answers, who are more than happy to share.
I agree. And that is so important for our listeners to know. You're not alone. We're here. I'm here. You're here. This is why we do what we do. It's a bit of paying it forward, and hopefully there is change and more autism awareness. And I thank you so much for being a guest on A Mother's Guide Through Autism. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bridget, for having me. It's been a pleasure meeting you and learning about you and your experience and your son, and learning about your other featured guests and speakers. What you're doing is extraordinarily important and appreciated.
I'm honored. Thank you so much. If you all liked this episode, if you found it helpful, please subscribe and share this episode with as many folks as you can. We really appreciate it because we are spreading knowledge, hope, and inspiration into our autism community and the world. And so if you like and subscribe, you help us share our message. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode in our grief series.